So this is a card for Eid Mubarak, which is a Islamic festival that involves feasting, kind of like Islamic Thanksgiving, I guess. A lot of family focus as well as giving food to the needy. I didn't have any products specific to this holiday, although such products do exist, and I will put a link to those in the description. What I chose instead was some alphabet stamps, because obviously you can spell anything with those, and a die of a Venetian skyline from Hero Arts. It looks like it has minarets and domes. It's probably actually Il Redentore, which is the Church of the Holy Redeemer, because it's got a dome as well as some campanili or bell towers. The architect for that was Palladio, so if you're familiar with Palladian architecture, that's the dude. So it's a pretty straightforward card. I'm starting out with some ink blending, and I chose a darkish blue that I'm using on a medium blue piece of paper. So the dark blue ink is actually called Desert Night from Altenew. And I really don't know where the blue paper came from. I just store my paper by color, not by manufacturer. And I'm just checking my die cut against my ink blending to make sure that I've got enough space there. So I'm going to go on and put the letters out to spell my greeting from these random alphabet sets I happen to have. And I'm not using my ink blended background at this stage because the stamps would pick up the ink blending as I test them. So I'm going to make sure that they're in a good spot, get them all evened up, and then I'm going to put my ink blended cardstock under the stamps. And I'm just evening them up, and now I'm going to make that switch. So I'm going to stamp on my ink blending using Versamark ink. And if you're going to reproduce this, you definitely want to make sure that your ink blending is dry before you take this step. So you want to let it dry, or you want to heat set it before you go on to using Versamark, otherwise you will just have embossing powder everywhere. I'm stamping the Versamark a couple of times to make sure that I get plenty of it down on the card front. And then I'm going to emboss using silver embossing powder. The embossing powder is from Stampin' Up, although obviously any silver embossing powder would be just fine. And once the embossing powder is in place, I'm using my heat tool to melt it until it is smooth and shiny. So I'm making a Starry Night background, and so my embossing is not perfectly clean. You can see a little bit of leftover embossing powder there. I'm going to embrace that as a feature instead of a bug. It just looks like some extra stars. So I've scribbled down some silver gel crayon onto an acrylic block, and I'm going to just draw on a couple of stars using my gel crayon and a paintbrush. If you have some tiny star die cuts, those would be perfectly appropriate here. If you don't, I mean, you can certainly paint some twinkling stars in the background. And I kind of wanted this background to look like just the very moment of dawn. So dawn is rising on the day of the holiday, and the sun is coming up, and we've got the stars still in the sky as dawn approaches. So after I've painted on some stars of my own, I am going to go ahead and flick a little bit of that gel onto the back of the card as well to create some tinier stars just from that spatter. If you have got metallic watercolor paint, that would be perfectly fine. If you have a sparkle pen, that would be fine. This is just what I had to hand, and so made it very easy to use this particular approach. Could also use gold embossing and gold die cut and gold spatter. Either way, I think would look perfectly fine. So after I do the spatter, I'm going to assemble my background onto the card, put my die cut on the bottom, and then I think we are good to go. So this is a very quick card. I have cut out some of the repetitious parts, but I think the whole thing, beginning to end, took about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. And I think that this approach could be good for any time you need a starry background, want to use a starry background, and certainly ink blending with just two colors, starting with colored paper is a very quick way to handle ink blending. I don't have a lot of patience for it, and so getting a blend between two colors is easier if one of the colors is already done for you, right? So I hope that you'll be inspired to spell out a greeting with your alphabet stamps and to think of your die cuts in a slightly new way as you are going through and making your paper crafts. I had a lot of fun repurposing what I had rather than going shopping, although like I said, there are aid products available from Altenew. If that is something that you use frequently, you may be interested in those. So I sure appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.